What a privilege to be with you today. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing such extraordinary energy and insight into this conference. I was thinking about the journey I went on to get here. And I don't mean sort of the drive up. I mean like the 20-year journey. 20 years ago, I was looking at a piece of paper in my hands, and I was with all these scribbles, all these answers to a question. And the question was, what would you do if you could do anything? And when I was finished with that 20-minute brainstorm, I noticed not what I'd written down, but what I had not written down, what was not on the list. Law school, I noticed, was not on the list, which was inconvenient because I was at the time at law school. And I thought, I better call my parents. So I called the 15-digit number back to England. I was at law school there, and I was visiting friends here. And what would you say? What would you say to your son after all that time, all that money, all that effort? He's halfway around the world calling you on a whim. What would you say?
Who's the girl?
Who's the girl? Dad, there's no girl. You get to be my dad now. That's what you wanted, isn't it? There's no girl, but I think there's something else I'm supposed to do. What are you going to say?
What are you going to do next?
Well, I've been giving it a great deal of thought for about 20 minutes.
What have you come up with?
I have a vague sense that I'd like to teach and write. What do you say?
Teach and write what and where?
I don't know many of those answers. Is it okay to quit law school?
What about all the time you spent in law school and all the money?
That sounds like a no. Thanks, Dad. Round of applause here for my dad here. My dad listened, which was not entirely like him. He said, actually he became quite Churchillian. He said, son, he says, you know what we've always told you. Parenthetically, what do you think that he thinks he always told me? What do you think he thought was the great message of his life to me?
Do what you love.
Yeah, do what you love. Follow your dreams, I think I heard somebody. No, he said go to law school. But apparently he forgot that too, because he pulls this out, because all Englishmen quote Shakespeare over tea and crumpets for breakfast in the morning. He pulls out this line as if it's to thine own self be true, son. This is from Hamlet. Let me tell you how many times he's told me that. Never. Not before, not since. This is the only time. I've always told you, son. So I quit law school. That's the short of it there. But why does this matter for today's conversation? Because on the piece of paper was a question. And that question has kept me up at night, so to speak, for almost 20 years. Now here's the question. Actually, I'm going to pause for a second. Do we have any runners in the room? Any runners? I love it when people answer this question. They do it like this. They're like, which means like I've heard of the concept. The rest of us are just guilty. We're like, we wish we could put our hands up now. Okay, somebody who put their hands up here. Somebody here. Put your hand up again. Okay, that will do. What's your name? Tom. If you and I were to have a race, Tom, and you won, which you would. and I mean, you won decisively 50 yards ahead of me at the end of the first race. You can get the picture. And then we race a second time. In the second race, you're 50 yards ahead of me at the beginning. It's like a relay. You get to take all the advantage from the first race. Does it make sense? You win again by another 50 yards. You're now 100 yards ahead. We have a third race. Make sense? Give me like approximate percentage chance you're going to win the third race with all that cumulative advantage. Go. Well, you can still answer it however you'd like. You don't know. You have to give an answer. What's that?
50 yards.
No, but we're asking for a percentage. 100%. It's a little bit rude. Of course, it's not rude at all, is it? It's not rude. It's obvious, isn't it? Of course, you keep winning. Now you predicting that there may be a little bit of a trick to this, of course, is the idea, because of course you should win the third time. But now to the question that was on the piece of paper. Why is it that otherwise successful people and companies and ventures don't continue to be successful? Because however logical it is that you should keep winning, that isn't what happens. To use the flight metaphor, it's easier to get something up in the air than it is to keep it there. As the Wright brothers helped to demonstrate, in tremendous breakthroughs eventually, but their first flight's 12 seconds long. I mean, this was like the greatest breakthrough in aeronautical history, 12 seconds. It's harder to get something to stay and to keep going and to fly well and to fly on. So the question I put to you, I now put to you again, why is it that otherwise successful people and companies don't break through to the next level? Why don't they carry on winning? What do you think? Don't be shy, go. Complacency. They're so far ahead, they win so much, they don't care so much, they're not as hungry. Go, more. Go, what was that? Huh? The race changes, the whole context, the landscape changes. Good, more. What else? Go. A lack of focus. That's like you read ahead. Not so funny. More. What do you think? What's that? New competitors, new people challenging the norms. They asked me to move back. I can't see a thing. So let me share an answer that came to me. An answer hidden in plain sight. I'm working with Silicon Valley Ventures, with companies. And I noticed this pattern. Step one, they get focused on the right things at the right time. Some luck in that, but they get focused. It leads to success. That's step two. They get success. But what follows success? That's a curious question. As it turns out, an increase of options and opportunities. Does that make sense? More people want to work with you. More clients are interested in partnering. You just have this increase of options and opportunities. That sounds like the right problem to have. It did to me when I was first working with these companies. That's what everybody wants. And that's fine in a way. But it so very often leads to what Jim Collins has called the undisciplined pursuit of more. The undisciplined pursuit of more. If a venture falls into the undisciplined pursuit of more, it will undermine the very things that led to success in the first place. Can you think of examples yourself of companies that were once tremendously successful, that fell into the undisciplined pursuit of more, and that led them to plateau in their progress or fail altogether? If you can, I want to hear about them. What companies can you think of that followed that pattern? Go. IBM. More. Kodak. BlackBerry. Who? I cannot make out that for anything.
You said Moreland Software.
Moreland, thank you. Blame it on being English. Microsoft. We could keep going, couldn't we? These are Microsoft it's an interesting thing, but let's riff on Microsoft for a second. Because it's Bill Gates that made the precise point I am trying to make, which is that success, his words, is a very poor teacher. I mean, of all the odd things to say, richest man in the world, one of the most successful ventures in history, success is a poor teacher? Why? Why would success be a poor teacher? For him, he said, yeah, go.
We tend to learn from our failures.
We learn from failures. We don't want that to be true, do we? We wish we could just learn from the good times, from successes, but somehow failures teach us. Yeah. Why is success a poor teacher? It takes us away from, go. It's a dangerous thing to be successful and not know why. How true that is. Because you can, among other things, start to say, the reason that I've been successful is me. And there's a hubris born of that success, instead of understanding all the context for why it was really done, so that you can then go back to the beginning. I mean, this surely helps to explain why there's so many one-hit wonders in almost every industry, including, of course, the technology industry. So here's the question. Is this same pattern that is true in organizations also true at the individual level? Could the individual go, through a pattern of being focused, becoming successful, getting too many options, and therefore plateauing in their progress, falling into the undisciplined pursuit of more. Could that be true? I worked with an executive here in this valley who did award-winning work, design work, extraordinary product. I bet you used it in the day. And it helped put the company he was part of on the map, gave it a sort of halo effect, and so it got purchased by a larger, and as it turns out, more bureaucratic firm, goes into the new company. Now he, as an individual inside of that company, is keen to be a good team player, wants to be liked by everybody, and so he starts a simple strategy. It's like, say yes to everyone and everything without really thinking about it. That's the idea. What happens, do you think, show me in fact, what happens to his stress? Goes up. What happens to the quality of his work? Goes down. And that's an interesting problem. He's the same curious, capable, successful person he was before, but somehow his whole performance is different. He's so frustrated. He thinks, look, I think I'm just going to leave. I'm going to quit, retire, and do something. Maybe I'll consult back to the company. And then someone internally says, yeah, do that. But they're like, why don't you just retire in role? And he's like, quit, stay, and don't tell anybody? Is that what you mean? And he said, no, I don't mean that. I mean, take a new lens to your work. Imagine you were only paid for the results that you produce, for the breakthroughs. It doesn't matter how many emails you respond to. That's not the evidence of success. It's did you make a contribution? And he starts taking this on, this new lens. What happens to him? What do you think? He gets fired. He doesn't get fired. But it would change the tenor of our whole conversation, wouldn't it? If he, in fact, had been fired by pursuing this different alternative strategy that we're talking about. No, he said, I got my life back. I don't know who he got it back from, but he got it back somehow. I got my life back. That meant that he was able to go to the gym every night, eat dinner with his wife every night. At work, what happened? He found space again, space. In that space, he found his creative freedom to make a higher contribution. By doing less but better, he did better. Oh, that's what he learned from it. But what about you? I want to take like a snap poll of the group, right? Actually snap. If any of the following that were true for him are also true for you. So have you ever found yourself like he was, stretched too thin at work or at home? Snap for that. I see somebody snapping, like dancing at the back. Have you ever found yourself busy but not necessarily productive? Snap for that. Have you ever found your day being hijacked by other people's agenda? Yeah. Why? Why would you do that? Everyone snapped everything. Why? Why would you do that? I mean, why as the CEO of your own life would you choose to allocate resources in such a way that you're stretched too thin at work or at home? That you're busy but not productive? That other people's agenda seems to be the one controlling yours? Why would you do that? Why do you do that? That's a harder question, isn't it? As you're thinking about it, I want to present a visual. On your left, this is the path that this executive pursued without meaning to. Like he didn't intend to. He didn't say, well, I just want to start making a millimeter progress in a million different directions. He didn't say, look, my goal is for my stress to go up and the quality of my work to go down. That wasn't intentional. But somehow he found himself there. I don't think anybody here set out with the intent to be busy but not productive. The intent to be stretched too thin across our communities that we serve. So how do we get there? Why does that happen? When there's an alternative strategy where we put our resources more carefully, thoughtfully around the things that really do matter, that could break through to the next level, to our highest point of contribution. I will put to you that what we're describing here is beyond this room. that we're in a culture, a cultural norm, we should name it non-essentialism. It is the undisciplined pursuit of more, but not on an individual or even venture, unique basis, but across the whole of Western culture now. I mean, just think about this as a single data point for your consideration. The word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. What did it mean? What do you think it meant? Actually, it meant just what it means now, which is what? The most important. How many? One. It's singular. I mean, the word is singular. I'm making this up. I'm just stating the obvious. It stayed in the singular form in the English language for the next 500 years. I mean, that is a long time, right? Like, that's half a millennium. People weren't talking, according to Drucker, about priorities. So priorities came into the English language as part of the Industrial Revolution. What does it mean? What does the word mean if you pluralize it? Can you have very, very many, very first, before all other things? And yet, haven't you been to a meeting yourself where somebody said, with no sense of irony at all, here are my 20 priorities? They all have to be done perfectly, now. And then somebody says, no, we have to up the ante, it has to be done yesterday. That is a form of madness. And talk of agility doesn't reduce the madness. There's so much counterfeit agility in the companies I've worked with here in Silicon Valley. It's breathtaking. Everyone feels fast, but it's just motion sickness, not momentum. So I will put to you that there are only two solutions to the problem. Only two. Cures to the undisciplined pursuit of more. One is failure. So Blockbuster is a lot simpler today than they used to be. And I don't even mean that really to be very humorous. One solution to massive, undisciplined, increasing complexity and noise and non-essentialism is failure and the threat of failure. And that by far is the most common cause for suddenly getting out of the undisciplined pursuit of more. Ask Enron. In fact, ask any successful turnaround, and you will find that they had to eventually face they were doing too many things and get focused. So what's the only alternative option? And that is to become an essentialist. That is to be a leader of a particular kind that focuses before you have to, that employs this idea, the disciplined pursuit of less. So the antidote is that an essentialist says, I will act upon all of this noise before I have to. I will act upon all of these decisions. I will not do everything that I want to. I will be more selective, more thoughtful than that. I mean, we can take it all about to the idea of your closet. You know your closet like gets the undisciplined pursuit of more, too much stuff, overpacked. You think, if only I had a larger closet, that would solve the problem. Until you get one, you realize that wasn't the problem. That gets filled up too. And finally, you facing failure in your closet, decide to do something about it, and you take an item off the shelf as if to give it away. And then in that moment, something mysterious, almost magical happens. As it happened to you? And you look at it and you think, well, it might fit me again. It might come back into fashion again. And the item goes back on the shelf. We're asking an undisciplined question. We're saying, could I ever possibly use this again in the future? Which means the answer is yes. But what the essentialist does is becomes far more selective and thoughtful. Says, do I love it? Does it spark joy? Is it exactly the right thing? And you find that there's hardly any things in your closet that match that description, that criteria. That's the point of the questions. But it turns out it's better in your closet to have fewer things that you love over lots of things you never even wear. In a similar manner, the essentialist is thoughtful and selective. May I suggest, like, the 90% rule, for example. The 90% rule says, mean, if you have an opportunity or an idea and it's like really unattractive, like it's a 1 out of 10 for you, it's not so hard to say no. It's not so hard to move away from it. But if you have an idea that's a 6, 7, or 8, you go, well, you know, it's good, right? It's good. In fact, it might be one of those opportunities that last year you'd have given your right arm for it. It was definitely great back then, but now it's just many, many options you have in front of you. They're all good. And that's the tyranny of the good. That's exactly what gets in the way of breakthrough performance. To go from being successful to very successful. That's precisely the problem, is we keep saying yes to the things that before we would have said yes to, but now we have to be willing to let go. We now have to make a trade-off. We now have to make a decision, which of course, you know this, the word decision comes from the Latin to cut or to kill. So to decide means to eliminate. It's inherently in there. So here we have the disciplined pursuit of less. To be an essentialist means to create space to explore what is essential, to eliminate what is non-essential, and to build a system or routine to make execution as effortless as possible. This is the antidote. And I want to tie the whole subject together by looking at an example outside of entrepreneurship. Very deliberately, in fact, because often if we want to have breakthrough insight into our own industry, we must look to other groups that might not hold the same dominant assumptions that are invisible to us within our own industry. And the story that I think seems most relevant here is the story of someone who didn't just almost become a barrister in England as I did, but actually did. And he might have stayed a barrister in London, but he had a family emergency come up in South Africa. So he travels across the world, and he's on a train in South Africa in first class. Bought the tickets, and he's in first class. But it's in the middle of apartheid, and so he's not permitted to be there. And they physically take him and throw him right off the train. I mean, in our current airline environment, it sort of brings it home a little bit. And the reason he can't be there is because he's Indian in a time that he's not allowed to be in first class. So it becomes a defining moment for him. He says, I'm going to take on the South African government. And he does. It takes him 23 years, and he is successful. And because he's successful, people have already now started to hear about what he's done. And so as he travels back to India, again on the train, the people want him, are clamoring for him to run for office. They want to put him into politics. And that's like a 6, 7, or an 8. It's like, I think a lot of people would have said yes to that. A non-essentialist would say yes, but he said, I just don't know how to really help yet. He says, for example, I do not know how it is possible that the British can be so successful in keeping us under their thumb when there's so few of them and so many of us. I don't know how they do it. So I have to explore. I have to create space to figure that out. And he doesn't make space like 2 weeks of a listening tour as some sort of political gimmick. He takes a year traveling across India. What's he trying to do? Create in his mind a sort of 3D system to understand all the different moving pieces. He's in the paddy fields with the poorest of the poor, trying to construct this, trying to find that thing that is essential. Believing, as essentialists do, that almost everything is noise, but a few things are really important. And that justifies the time it would take to explore, to learn. He finds the answer, the infinitely important and infinitesimally small item, salt. The British control the production of salt and therefore the whole food chain. And so he begins a walk across India in a demonstration of civil disobedience to make salt on the beaches. Became known as the Salt Marches. 600,000 people follow him. And the British stand back. Who is this little man in a loincloth? What is this that we're dealing with? We're dealing with an essentialist. Gandhi. deepest essentialist one can think of maybe in modern times. Died with 10 items to his name, eliminated everything from his life but what mattered. Do we believe for 1 second that he would have achieved the independence for the Indian people if he'd tried to take it all on? There's a beautiful story almost nobody knows about his life. When his grandson, who was still living in South Africa, was beaten up, once for being too black, and then later once for being too white. He's angry, frustrated, as you can just imagine a teenager would be. And Gandhi says, I have enough discipline, enough space. You can just come and live with me, and I will listen to you. Aaron, his grandson, told me he listened to him an hour a day for 1.5 years. Focused on him, focused on that. So you can imagine the heads of state all over the world that are just pushed aside. It's just fine, because this is what matters. It was essentialist experiments that gave the advantage tremendous power. How much impact? How much power? When he died, it was the US Secretary of State, General George C. Marshall, who said of Gandhi, here is a man who has shown, now you fill in the blank, that X is more powerful than empires. Now, what do you think is more powerful than empires? The quote was simplicity. That simplicity is more powerful than empires. And Einstein said that generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth. When I was in South Africa recently, I went to the home where he was born and was given what I was told was the only poem Gandhi ever wrote. And in the poem found 4 words. They shook me, these words. Reducing oneself to zero. Reducing oneself to zero. That is what an essentialist can do. To remove all the trivial many, to focus ultimately on the singular purpose that really matters. And I believe that if you find that, that will matter too. Thank you ever so much for having me. Thank you.